Welcome to the Hessian Scrum, episode 3. Joining me today are two members of the band known for writing 25-plus minute songs, the kings of the long-form song, Roman and Viriato from Into Oblivion. Thanks for joining us.
Hails. Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, for a lot of people, you're known as the band that writes these very long, epic black death metal songs. Can you tell us about where the idea came from writing such long songs from?
To be honest, it was completely accidental. Basically, when we first started the band off, you go to our first album, which most people think Creation of Monolith is our first album, so they kind of mistake the self-titled for a demo. But you go to the self-titled, longest one on there is maybe about 9 minutes. I think that's the first version of Utter Ruin right there. And, everything else is about, 6 to 7 minute range. But we got some really short ones on there, like Stormcrow or Corpse Legions or other ones like that. So, back then, it was much more Slayer, Entombed influenced. But yeah, I don't know, I guess what it came down to, actually, and I don't think I did it very well, but it ended up being something else in the long run. It all started with the song Creation of Monolith.
Yeah.
Because essentially, I was kind of trying to play around with something very primitively influenced by the Parsifal overture, and I don't think it quite became that, but essentially I just kept going with it, and before we knew it, the song was 20 minutes, and and
well, we don't plan to record or come up with 20-minute songs. It just we just riff off each other, and Roman's the riff master here, but we never say, hey, we got to make a 20-minute song, this is our thing. It's happened as organically as you could imagine. It's kind of funny when you think about it.
It's kind of like the songs go on as long as they have to, basically. So I guess in the long run, it's not an accident that being influenced by some of the things we are, that we write this way, because if you're listening to Tangerine Dream or Klaus Schulze, or if you're listening to again, I referenced Wagner's Parsifal at the beginning of this, or you're listening to Bruckner or something like that, it's your frame of reference for this kind of thing, I guess, is a little broader. So we just never worried about song lengths, I guess.
The only death or black metal song that somewhat resembles you, very loosely, that I can think of, is Unto Infinite Twilight, Majesty of Eternal Damnation from Diabolical Conquest.
The incantation song.
Yeah.
You know what? That's not the first time somebody's brought that up. I think stylistically, the one thing I can say is, that song's got a fair amount of long doom sections. It's got a lot of that abyssal tremolo riffing, and I definitely like those things a lot. So I can see on that front, actually, there's maybe more that connects the two than just the length. But that's a reference I've actually heard somebody make in the past. So it's cool to see somebody else pick up on that.
Thing that surprises me a lot, and it surprises a lot of people in the prog metal world and everything, when they have those long songs, they always tend to have a very choppy, random transition that makes kind of no sense, where it just shifts, to a jazz section or some kind of weird ambient stuff. But you guys, despite being influenced by bands like Tangerine Dream and all that, you've never fallen into that kind of complacent, riffless quotes atmosphere. How do you avoid that in such long songs?
Yeah, well, I hate everything always has to flow. It's difficult to describe, how whether that works or not. But at the same time that you have to, it's difficult to talk about, to be perfectly honest. It's just.
I've got something.
Yeah, shoot.
So the way it kind of works, it's the songwriting process, and we kind of each member of the band kind of knows where their strengths are and when to interject. And it's Roman has the raw material, and we kind of each take a part of hammering it out. And obviously there's riffs that we don't quite like and we don't quite agree on, but what Roman does is he'll morph a previous riff and we'll just do something to the entire song that's I can't explain it. It's just at that moment, the best term for it is just magic. He goes back and with the raw material, he hammers it over time. Kave, our second guitarist, will give some ideas. Our drummer will. Me, I'm the least musically inclined in the group. So I'll maybe add like, oh, maybe like do this drum part, and to me it sounds silly, but then ends up working. And it's the songwriting process itself. Like Roman just like knows how to not recycle, but just like morph riffs during the songwriting process, and then yeah, that's it.
I guess at the end of the day, you know, one thing I very much one of the things I always loved about black metal, about ambient music, but any good music in any sort of long format is that, you know, it's flows, it's fluid. And like, I mean, I have I've had a habit in the past sometimes of, I don't know, I have a particular reaction to this where it's just like, if I hear songs going well for about a minute and, you know, I'm enjoying it and it's good, and all of a sudden, like they just throw in a riff that I don't like, I just turn it off. I just stop it right there. I have a pretty strong revulsion to, and again, the problem is this is like a strictly like, this is a qualitative thing. It's hard to be like, this is what makes it or this is what doesn't make it. So I think that really at the end of the day, it comes from our influences, you know. It's on the one hand, you know, the dynamicism, the explosiveness, the maze-like labyrinth, you know, structure of death metal. But yeah, I also very much like, you know, just the way black metal flows. And I think that between those two things and our other influences, maybe that's where some of what you're talking about comes from.
I think everyone associated to the label in any form, you know, loves the first two At the Gates records, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
But I can hear a slight influence, but you know, they've had those very sudden dynamic changes in their music.
Yes.
And it always worked for them. I mean, have you guys ever like, you know, told yourselves, you know, why don't we write a short, doesn't have to flow as well song and like make it a bit more dynamic, or does it not fit with the Into Oblivion universe?
Well, I mean, I think that actually as things have been going on, you know, it's funny, you know, you look at the last EP we did, and Eagle of the Serpent Sun, that's a re-recording. You know, that's, I think that's one of our longest songs right there. And the other two songs, well, actually Shattering Ascent is a re-recording too, but the newest one on there, you know, where Winds Wail and Gnaw, that's only about 7.5 minutes right there. And there actually was a bit more of an attempt to go, you know, to basically take risks on our format, I suppose, you know, to basically compress things, maybe not do as many repeats. That's one thing that's definitely changed a lot over time. It's like the black metal aspect, I think it's definitely still there, but it's not quite, I suppose the ambient nature is not as much there now as it used to be. So we're kind of trending in that direction generally, I would say. The newest one we're working on is very death metal sounding. You can probably get like the way the song Shattering Ascent sounds, that might be a good bar for it. Maybe even the one we did on Paragon, So Bloweth the Winds of War. It's like, you know, kind of, I would say more at the same time, like a little more percussive, a little more dynamic, a little more primitive, maybe even, but like still very much in our style. So I don't know, like at the end of the day, the songs kind of, I'm going to say this a lot over time, but the songs just kind of develop on their own in a certain way. Like we'll end up doing a whole bunch of different, I suppose, styles at the end of the day. And they'll just develop and, you know, come around in a certain way. It's just, for me, the most important thing is that it's a unified whole. You know, it's a unified whole. And as long as it does that, I mean, you know, obviously we're not going to go like, we're never going to go like too far out there, but you know, it can take a lot of different forms as long as the structure is unified. Now, it's interesting you bring up At the Gates, because I mean, everybody's talking about At the Gates when they talk about us, which I can't tell you how awesome that is for me, man, because Red in the Sky is ours, with Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness, but particularly Gardens of Grief. That might be one of my favorite metal releases of all time, probably my favorite death metal release of all time. I mean, I think if there was a band that ever took death metal in terms of tonality as close as it was ever going to get to Wagner, that was the band. And that might have even been the release right there. So like, and I think the interesting thing with At the Gates and a lot of the death metal bands we like is that, like, At the Gates, because of their sense of melody, they do kind of cross over with black metal a bit. They do have, there's a black metal feel to it. It's kind of like the first Dark Throne album, you know, Soulside Journey. It's like, it's those melodic tremolo riffs. I mean, it's ever since I got into metal, what I always loved was like it had to be fast and it had to have tremolo riffs. So I think anyways.
Our friends over at Terminus podcast, they said something that was really interesting that, even Lone Goat agreed on, that your sound is specifically Canadian, Anglo-Canadian. What do you think about that?
I think people mention that very much in reference to the Axis of Advance comparison and the Sacrament Abolishment comparison, which for me is interesting because we actually got that comparison even on the first release, which I don't really see it there. I think what it has to do with is the fact that, again, the speed with which we play, the intensity with which we play, the tremolo riffs, but the desire to also do something like, more conventionally melodic. I really, what I got that more from anything is the aforementioned bands, but Ceremonium's No Longer Silent was actually a really big influence on a lot of the songs I write, and a lot of the riffs I write. But over time, actually, I did I'll be honest, the first time I heard Axis of Advance, it's funny because this goes back to something earlier I said. I heard the song Wrath Pounding maybe the first year of university, and I don't think I'd really listened to them before that. And I was listening, oh man, that opening riff is really cool. This is really intense. And then as soon as it got into the blast beat part, the vocals sounded like he was rapping or something. I'm like, okay, I can't listen to this. I shut it off. but later on, I went and checked it out. I listened to Strike because a lot of the guys here in the scene really like Axis of Advance, and I'd see one of our buds wearing a Strike shirt all the time, and then I'd listen to the list, and then eventually I'd listen to the Purify EP, which I really like too, and that became an influence more later on. It wasn't until Paragon that Axis of Advance was a conscious influence on Into Oblivion. So I always find that comparison very interesting. Yeah. You wanted to comment on the Canadian thing?
Oh, just for me, I think it's a geography thing. I don't remember listening to them while we were starting out and recording our stuff. And it's just I think people expect you to sound like Blasphemy. They expect you to sound like Conqueror and all those guys. I think it's mostly a geography thing, but for the trained musician, I think they see or they hear that in us. And like Roman said, it was completely unintentional in the beginning, and then once we started listening to it, then it kind of creeped in. But I think most people would just be like, "Oh, these guys are Canadian. They got to sound like this." And this is the closest thing because of geography. That's what I think it is.
One thing I've noticed that's evolved immensely in your music, along with the time, is also the vocals. I was listening to the old version of Eagle of the Serpent Sun. Sorry, I think the newer version not only doesn't rely on the vocals, but the vocals add so much to it. There is a lot of interplay between you both, a lot more richness, a lot more depth in the style, and that really helps the listener, get as a guide towards these very complex song structures. I mean, how did that work? I mean, even the tone of the vocals, because I think on the first demo it had kind of that Swedish mid-range, very almost juvenile, and then it developed more. Kind of with that very strong rasp, and then you use the lower vocals from time to time.
Yeah. I think it was, I worked on my technique a lot more, breathing exercises and stuff like that. I did try to go for a more a Thomas Lindbergh kind of thing, because he has this very cryptic howl to his vocals. I can't really explain it. And that's what gives it its power. For me, I always found his vocals not weak, but in the sense it's kind of in the mix, back a little. Again, sorry for the actual musicians out there, I'm the least musically inclined, so my terminology is going to be a little different. But he had this just spectral, woven quality to it, and I tried to mimic that a lot. And I just think maybe my esophagus or whatever couldn't really sustain it. So my other biggest influence for that is Aversifera. What's his name again, Roman? Sanguine. Yeah, Sanguine from Aversifera. Yeah. And for me, it's really important to that guiding principle, like you were saying. It's just really important to enunciate and for the listener to hear what I'm saying, because there is a message there that I want to impart to people. And yeah, it just came from that, working on that technique, and like kind of like shopping around for not shopping around, but like looking at my influences and saying, okay, which one's better suited to like my vocal style, and which helps me enunciate more and get that message across.
Yeah, if I could just add into that, you know, my best comparisons for Viriato's voice right here would be that he very much Pete Helmkamp, big thing, definitely him, because, you know, the mid range, the raspiness, the enunciation, sanguine, obviously. I think those are the two things that I tend to think of the most when I think of his voice. And I'll say I have friends who listen to, you know, who are way less into metal than either of us or any of my, you know, any of our Hesh bros. But you know, basically they'll be like, yeah, he's my favorite vocalist because, you know, he enunciates, you can understand what he's saying. And I think one of the reasons that became one of the reasons that's significant is because Averse Saphira was probably one of the most singular, one of the largest influences on our work generally.
It tied us all together.
You know,
like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, it was that because it had this unity you rarely find in music. I can think of maybe two other bands that do this, Atlantean Codex and Summoning, where you have where the lyrics are so tied to the music. And not just that, but also all the imagery of the band. It has that, Wagner had that word for like the total artwork, and I forget what the exact, you know, German word is, but like that entire idea of the total artwork, that everything is like, it's not just like, oh, this has got some cool riffs or cool songwriting and the lyrics suck, or like the vocals suck, or no, it's the totality. It's the whole thing that's really important.
I'm pretty sure there's like 20 nouns smashed into that word.
Yeah, I think it's actually like,
and it just ends up sounding really cool at the end.
Yeah, you know, and I think it also comes down to the fact that, yeah, lyrics are important. I mean, you know, people talk about metal lyrics as maybe not being, you know, the focus, and I agree. Like, listen, at the end of the day, the music is the most important thing, but you have vocals, so they got to do something, right? So the lyrics might as well be good. And yeah, so our emphasis on things like lyricists, like the top metal lyricists, you know, aside from Averse Saphira, you know, you also have the stuff in At the Gates is amazing. And then my two other favorites, Tom G. Warrior and Celtic Frost. I mean, that's like, listen, that is the most Conan the Barbarian metal we'll ever get. The most Robert E. Howard metal we'll ever get is Celtic Frost 2 Megatherion. And then after that, Fenris on, particularly on A Blazing Northern Sky, just fantastic lyrics. And if you got good lyrics, you know, if you have, you know, a story you're trying to convey, a feel you're trying to get across, like, you have to enunciate. That's what it comes down to. Unless you're going for a feel where you're going for like that more, I guess, obscure, monstrous aspect where like you're trying to get more cryptic. Like, yeah, sure, you can enunciate less in that situation, but that's not what we're going for. No.
Like Revenge Blasphemy.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I was even going to bring up like stuff like, I mean, like, you know, I've been listening to Infestor like a ton lately, and I'm just like, yeah, I have no idea what they're saying right here.
Even blood, like Blood. Like,
oh yeah, Blood, yeah. But it works with it because like it's so cavernous and abyssal, and like just like the whole point is it's supposed to be like dark and obscure.
The only vocals that ever terrified me upon listening to it the first time.
You know, there are some very insane lyrics in Infestor. You know, I think they're really good in that style, but it's best that they're not heard. You know, we're all thinking about that one line that's gathered a lot of controversy. Unfortunately.
Oh, okay. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I suppose, yeah.
The Infestor line?
Yeah. Actually, I got a funny thing about Infestor, actually. So I remember that, you know, because Infestors, you know, like they're like, you know, New York, you know, kind of like percussive death metal influenced, you know, like they got the slams, they got the chugs, they got all that going on. And it's funny because I remember years back we were at a friend's place and we just like we're trying to come up with like the most ridiculous genre we can come up with, and I just said atmospheric slam. and, you know, then I'm like, wait a second, Infestor kind of is atmospheric slam. You know, because like, you know, they got all the you know, you got the spooky keyboards going on in the background and the cavernous atmosphere, but then you got like dun 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 dun, dun, you know, you got stuff going on like that.
Yeah, I see exactly what you mean. You know, I struggled with that album at first personally because I always hated slam, and it takes a while, you know, to go, wait, this is actually intelligent slam.
I actually me and a couple guys actually won up the atmospheric slam recently. We're like, now what somebody needs to do is depressive suicidal slam, you know. Oh man. But yeah, I wouldn't like, again, I think that's just like a kind of riff, you know. It's like as a genre, I don't think I can think of like a band I listen to that just does that. But come on, like everybody remembers Suffocation's Legion and Veracity slam. Everybody remembers, you know, dun, 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 dun. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, but you know, it's just like, it's another ingredient. It's another tool in the toolbox. Some bands use it more interestingly than others, I guess. At the end of the day, I was listening to Pessimists, what is it, Blood for the Gods, not too long ago. That album, it doesn't really have slams, but it's nice and ignorant. You know, I'm always about music that is simultaneously, you know, intense. It's got riffs, it's got songwriting, but it also knows how to get just really dumb.
Yeah, you know, it reminds me of a Tyrant Goat, Gal Dracona or something. Some band from Poland that could be described as like black slam.
Okay, now I'm gonna have to check that out.
It's very weird. I don't know. Yeah.
All right, send me that link at some point.
Definitely.
now I gotta hear it.
You know, one thing I really liked from the last EP is on the, you know, Eagle of the Serpent Sun. You know, you have that huge build up. The song has that intense climax at the end. The one thing you guys did really well is that you had that kind of cool down, if that makes sense. You know, the last few minutes where it was winding down, and that's something that's nobody has really done much in metal.
The Terminus guys were talking about
yeah,
that too.
Yeah. And actually, I just want to take a minute here to just say, hails to those guys. You know, shout out, like they're awesome. I don't think anybody. We've gotten a lot of great reviews for the stuff, you know, and I'm very grateful for, you know, all the work you've done and they've done in promoting it. But nobody understood what we're doing like the Terminus guys.
Better than those guys.
Yeah. So I just want to really point that out there. But yeah, the cool down at the end of that. Yeah. Initially, like, I think the thing that really influenced that song generally as a whole was at that time I was trying to go off this. I guess that was one of the ones where I don't even know how to put it. Like, you know, there were a couple of things in my mind while we were writing it. You know, Lord Wind, Graveland, Summoning, like those three things in particular. And I kind of wanted to do like this kind of summoning, like going off into the sunset kind of ending. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. And the way that we redid it this time is, I think that it's a vast improvement on the original. I mean, the original, don't go back and listen to the original if you've only heard the new one. Okay. It's really not that good.
You also wrote the lyrics for that one too. Most of them, I think.
Yeah. I think I did actually. Come to think of it, yeah, it does the majority of the lyrical work. But regardless, I did write a few. That one was definitely a good one. But anyways, regardless, yeah, that's I think what we did with it, with Kabe on the cello and our friend Ted playing you know, the violin. That's really what I had always wanted it to be initially. And basically, I actually kind of let Ted improvise a bit towards the end there. I didn't give him clear violin lines to write. I sent him the tracks, you know, because he'd heard us play it a ton of times. He loved the dynamics of the song. He's an old friend of mine, and I just kind of sent him the tracks, and you know, he sent me, okay, here's a MIDI of what I'm going to try to do, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to give you note suggestions or whatever, but I'm going to tell you, hey, listen, you know, try doing this a little more simply, try doing this a little more complicated, you know, that's, you know, go for this kind of feel here, that kind of feel there. And I think that really, if the song has the form that it does right now, it's because we decided to go less minimalist. The original one was very minimalist by comparison. You'll notice that the double kicks are running on, ironic to say for minimalism, but the double kicks are running on the drums practically the whole way through. It's basically got the same beat for like most of the song. And we're very sparing on the kind of instrumentation we used. And I will say this actually, that I think some of the jumps or risks I've taken in the more aesthetic aspects of the songs probably had to do at the end of the day with working with Baron and Cromlech, getting some of those, getting a little less obscure and getting into some of those more visceral, normal musical aspects, I suppose. And I kind of just wanted to have that outro where it's like we got the same theme running through, but you do very small variations on the melodies and everything else like that. Again, I don't think I could really elaborate on it more than that.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed in terms of evolution, because I did listen to all your stuff quite a while ago. I do believe that Paragon, in many ways, was the culmination of everything you did from the 2008 demo to there. With kind of Winds being a sort of like sidetrack. Exploration of what you did in the past. I mean, do you feel that like you guys have built up towards Paragon, because it kind of captures a bit of everything but does it even better? Even the artwork is like very similar to, well, not at all in the style but in scope and what you're trying to accomplish, but more refined. The black metal elements aren't as repetitive. It just keeps Do you guys feel like that you've been building up that style until you could get it as perfect as you could?
Yeah, I'll take this one for now. Like, it took us a long time to write every single song on that, and what was it? Since the last release, it was like what? 8 years or something like that.
There was a big gap.
There was a big gap, and we were working on that. Like not tirelessly, but like we practice once a week and like religiously, and it was a lot. Like we've had all that time to kind of do that, and I think that it wasn't like a conscious like we're gonna just outdo everything, but it just like evolved the more we practiced. Many conversations, many beers, and just some experimentation and just like blowing ourselves out of those waters just happened naturally. And I think it has a lot to do with time that we spent on that album and really focusing on our art. Because before that we had like a couple splits we under the banner of the Serpent Sun and
Oblivion's Oceans.
The split we did. And I was like one of the first times that like I wrote lyrics to the music, because usually I just like I have a notebook or like on the computer I'm writing lyrics quite frequently, and this time it's like I just made sure I was going to change my method up, because on Creation of a Monolith I had the lyrics written like way ahead of time, and then all of a sudden Roman's writing 20-minute songs. And I didn't have enough lyrics for it. So the reason why the vocals are sparse is because I kind of had to, by the time we decided to record, I had to kind of space it out in such a way that like we kind of have it going throughout a 20-minute song, because that came out of left field for me at that time. So with Paragon, for like just from a lyrical point of view and vocals, I really wanted to nail the placement. I really wanted to nail the theme of the lyrics. So yeah, like I pushed myself as a lyricist and vocalist on that album in particular.
Yeah, I think he's definitely right about that. I would say that absolutely Paragon was much in the way where we're working. I think that the trend that Into Oblivion has here is we're just going further and further on increasing the dynamicism. It's like the dynamics are the thing that's always going forward with us. And Paragon was a very conscious choice to increase the dynamics. So, we did things that we didn't really do as much before. Again, like, acoustic sections, radical changes in like, like you don't always need to be doing this one beat. You can, you can alternate with like, a different kick pattern, or this is getting onto very, technical stuff, but, but the small technical stuff adds up into the gestalt. It's like, basically, that was the whole trend of that album. And I think that was the thing that I didn't want to be repetitive. I was like, if we're going to have a long song, I want to make sure it's interesting. And I think it just had to do with, at the end of the day, listening to more death metal around that time too. I think that really influenced the song construction there. And I look back in the past always when we do new stuff, and I always look at it and I critically analyze the older works and say, what do I, there's always going to be something. It's never perfect. You're always going to go back and be like, nope, there's something I should have done different. I don't like this about it. This should have been fine tuned, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess that I guess there was just a very basic desire to do less repetitions on things, but at the same time to still allow the song to be united as a whole. So, you supplement, or rather you replace repetitions with like variations of things. And actually I like the term the Terminus guys used, leapfrogging riffs. That is actually something I've literally thought about that in my head while writing. You kind of like, a couple riffs later, you bring back an older theme, but then you change it a bit. And, you got to make sure that the most important aspect of the song is the unity of the whole. That's the structure is the most important thing. You could make an entire song out of 2 chord riffs. I mean, or, if you're Iljarn, like you can just do like a song with a blast beat running through with 1 chord, and like if we're talking about like Strength and Anger. So like, you can make songs brutally simple, but they're still united as a whole, and they're still, beautiful works of art as a result. And then you can have something that's like technically all over the place. It might even have great riffs, but just the song doesn't come together.
Yeah, and like I think with Paragon in particular, we weren't like trying. We weren't slaves to the format. You don't have to repeat like the riff 100 times in black metal. Not shitting on black metal here, but you don't have to repeat a black metal riff a certain amount of times. And I think we were just getting away from kind of that slavishness towards those forms and being more tactful on a technical level on when to use them. I think just a comment on Roman's riffing there. Yeah, I think
a guiding impulse. I remember this because there's been so much time that's passed with the band. So this is like a trigger for certain memories, and I remember a very conscious impulse from the beginning. I remember reading a interview of Verse Saphira did, and Wrath and Sanguine were having this whole thing back and forth about how the biggest problem with modern metal was the great genreification, how everything was like divided into very strictly adhered to genres and everything like that, and how back in the 80s things were like a lot more fluid. And I wrote
speed metal.
Yeah, speed metal. Like it's like, is it speed metal? Is it power metal? Is it black metal? Is it death metal? I don't know. It's and that was a very conscious decision with Into Oblivion from the beginning. I never looked at any. Well, I know actually, really, at the end of the day, I never really looked at any style of metal as being something I couldn't use in the whole. And in particular, I mean, that's interesting because I always thought Verse Saphira themselves actually were like, black metal melodically, but they had some of the explosive nature and some of the dynamicism of death metal. So that was kind of a guide there too. So yeah, it's like, I think the band is just it's just been on a refinement process,
A lot of people have had these weird opinions on whether you guys were black metal or death metal. You sound black metal to the death metal crowd, and you sound death metal to the black metal crowd.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what? That's, again, from the beginning, it's like we like both. I didn't really fall into either camp. I liked the attitude and the feel of black metal and everything like that. But musically speaking, also very much like death metal. It's I probably trend more towards death metal on a musical level. Just because riffs, mazes of riffs, and just like crazy stuff going on all the time, and tempo changes and dynamics and everything else like that. But at the same time, it's black metal showed that simplicity could be elegant.
It's funny because when I think of an album that's as decisive in terms of genres, I'm thinking of Blizzard Beasts by Immortal. Is it that, or is it black metal?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know what? I'd say this actually comes back to like Immortals. It's almost superfluous to say that it's one of my favorite black metal bands because they're just objectively one of the best black metal bands ever. And it's interesting because I find that that's like Blizzard Beasts is just a natural culmination. I think somebody once said, you may remember this quote, that essentially every 18 months from the founding of a band, the distance between them and their influences is reduced by half. Maybe, yeah. Okay, so you probably do remember that quote. Okay, cool. Yeah. So point being, you can see that happen with Immortal, and especially when they get to at the heart of winter, and you got in like full heavy metal at that point, or relatively heavy metal. But yeah, so Blizzard Beast, you got the death metal thing going on. The Morbid Angel influence is very obvious, but I think the Morbid Angel influence in Immortal was always there. Like, you listen to those riffs on Pure Holocaust or Diabolical Full Moon Misses or Battles in the North, and it's like, these are kind of like the fast warping riffs that Morbid Angel was doing on Altars of Madness. So that was always there, and that was really always the stuff we were into, the stuff that bordered between both sides.
Yeah, which is what we really like to have on the label, which is what all the people on the label, working with the label, buying from the label, tell me that they want. David Rosales once said, now that death metal can no longer exist without the knowledge that black metal has given metal in general. A lot of like pure death metal sounds redundant right now. Without there's OSDM, but that's another thing. But just in general, do you think that death metal is dead without black metal?
I think to a certain extent. You know what? I think that because black metal naturally, at least in the form that it came about in the 90s, it very much came as a reaction to death metal in a certain way, like a progression from it in certain respects. And so I think that's not wrong. That's not wrong to say that at the end of the day. I think that there's a certain amount of vitalism that's re-injected back into death metal with black metal influence. And I think that's very much, whether consciously or unconsciously, that's something that's part of what we've been doing. I would probably agree with that statement generally, but I'm trying to think of bands generally. And the thing is, like, with newer death metal bands, I'll very often hear like, oh man, this is some cool stuff. This is like, C level, B level maybe, but it's very rare that like I find something pure death metal lately that really catches my attention, that's newer. So like, for example, one of the, it's, people will laugh when I say this because I can't shut up about these guys, but the new, it's not even new. This is how out of the loop I am sometimes, but over the last year, I've really got into Emberdawn, by Methodist. Really happy to be on the same label as those guys. That's some of the most ambitious songwriting I've seen in a long time. And I know that, they'll refer to their stuff as dark metal and everything like that. That's not an inaccurate description. I mean, like, I think that's what they were going for. But yeah, you can absolutely see, the black metal influence coming back in there with the death metal. And it would, listening to that without the black metal aspect would be unimaginable. And it wouldn't be as relatively groundbreaking for this time period as it is if it didn't have that. So yeah, I agree 100%.
They've done really well. The new album Offscourings came out a week ago.
Yes.
They toned down the black metal elements a bit because they really want to explore their dark metal bit. But yeah. I noticed that. I did notice that. I haven't given it an in-depth listen yet, but everybody's saying it's great, and I'm definitely going to check it out some more. Newer stuff always comes slowly to me. It's I don't know what it is. One of my friends was trying to get me into Infamous, like for years, and then just one day it just finally clicked for me. So
it's weird. It's weird how it happens. You know, I'm a slow digester of this kind of stuff. Like I'll listen to a lot of things, you know, very briefly or whatever. But you know, for things to stick, sometimes I need to hear about it or listen to it on and off for like a while before I really decide that I think it's good. You know,
I was talking about this with Tempestuous Might, who was pushing Into Oblivion on me for a long time. You know, he had you on his top black metal list and top death metal list on YouTube.
Yeah.
We believe that there is an almost silver age of metal where all these bands like you, Mephitis, Polemicist, coming in full force and showing, you know, we have the death metal part, we have the black metal part, we're going to mix it into our own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I believe that is the future of metal, and I'm saddened that, you know, a lot of bands, when they do death and black metal, they like, here's the death metal part, here's the black metal part, and it just sounds somewhat boring.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it does come down to you're going to always have in every era, you know, how many, you know, especially with how easy it is to make music nowadays, you're going to have so much garbage floating out there. And you're going to have a lot of people that it is like when you're approaching art, you know, in any respect, you know, whether we're talking about music or anything else, like I'm not going to say that there shouldn't be any rigidity, that like there should be a plan, a goal, ambition, everything like that. And you shouldn't want to betray your principles with respect to that. But yeah, I think that you don't want to be, as Viriato was saying earlier, a slave to form. You know, form is a tool. You know, it's things can, like the essence of something fundamentally comes down to melody and how the song is structured. And everything after that is just a way of expressing it. And there are better and worse ways of expressing it. Don't get me wrong. Like, you know, it's to go back to a quote that you may remember as well. It's, you know, I think somebody once made a comment about Beethoven's Ninth still being beautiful if it was played on kazoos, you know, but I think it would probably sound pretty ridiculous if you did. So like the essence of the song would still come across, but, you know, presentation is still important at the end of the day. And that's where the concepts of genres and styles come into, you know.
You know, that brings me onto a very interesting point. You know, I make sure to never make it public about, you know, what Hessian firm wants on the label. And, you know, there's the famous kazoo test, right? You know, that is the most important part, honestly. You know, we all know that. You know, how much do you think the presentation matters? Because, you know, we live in a world, despite all this digital stuff, it costs like what, 20, 30 grand, you know, to get a 1990s Morbid Angel tone nowadays. So
yeah.
Do you think like bands have to do more? Because, you know, we're all using the same amp sims, you know, we're all using the same interface, we're all on Reaper.
I mean, no, definitely. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I was listening to Sentence Shadows in the Past with a friend of mine, you know, a couple months back. And listen, I'm a North From Here guy. Like North From Here, that's again, somebody name dropped that with reference to the new IO stuff, and I thought that was a really cool reference because I love that album. North From Here was a very early favorite for me. But you know, over time, I kind of got into Shadows of the Past, not because it's better, but just it's kind of scratches an inch. You know, it scratches an inch. And the big thing about it is like that guitar tone is just, it's thick, it's good, it's like, it's so awesome. And you know what, you just can't make that guitar tone anymore. Like there's something about the sound they had there in the early 90s, like you will go insane trying to get that sound. Like it's never the same. And no matter how old school something sounds, it never sounds the same like it did back then. So I think it's a bit of a, I'm sure you can do it. It's just, you know, I don't know what you got to do to do it. It's a bit of a fool's errand chasing that. But yeah, presentation is just how important is presentation? Well, it's as important as, you know, wanting to have the medium expressed, have the content expressed properly. Like, I think that, for example, Into Oblivion might be interesting as a Dungeon Synth project, but it would probably still sound okay, you know, but like, but it would. I don't think it would have like the same gripping appeal that it has with people as metal band, you know. So I think that, again, I can't define it necessarily, but if I make that comparison, like you get an idea of what I'm talking about. Like it's important enough.
completely agree, though. It's a shame that a lot of bands seem to think that the aesthetics is everything, as long as you have the big tone. Yeah. A lot of the lyrics refer to thrones, swords. Do you really see yourselves as being caught within the whole Greco-Roman universe? You have songs like Triumvirate, and there's a lot of references to that period in time. The Paragon cover art.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for that's me mostly reading the Odyssey, Homer, all of this stuff. Going over the lyrics again, when I started picking up the lyrics, Roman wrote most of the lyrics for the first album. I think I wrote Stormcrow, the lyrics to Stormcrow, which was like at that point where we were teenagers, anti-war, like the war of Iraq just started. Yeah. So it was a very anti-war song. And then from there, I noticed I started like writing about swords and stuff, but not like as a sword and sorcery Conan thing, even though that worked its way into Paragon, because I did read Robert E. Howard, but more as like the concept of battle and war as inner and outer thing. So I make references to it more to like a spiritual battle, and it comes like outward from that. Like with Paragon, I was just doing a lot of reading, not particularly of the Odyssey or Homer, but some commentary on that for some pretty interesting figures. And I remember reading that Constantius Chlorus he went on a fool's errand to find the birthplace of the gods.
In northern Britain. Yeah,
in northern Britain, and that I couldn't stop thinking about that. And I was telling Roman, I was like, Roman, like, we have to. I'm going to write something about this because it was just so intriguing to me that this idea was there, and just trying to the insanity of that, and like the scope of that. Like, you're literally trying to encroach on the spiritual plane, and it had my mind buzzing for a very long time. So I tried to create our own mythos. Like, I tried to create a mythos. Whether I was successful or not, I come off as like a dungeon synth nerd or something like that. But very much I use swords and stuff like that as a metaphor for inner and outer war. And it's still like, it kind of gives me chills to this day thinking about that idea.
Yeah, no, it's and for the record, the next IO album will be called Throne.
Yeah,
who would have known? I thought you guys were joking.
Yeah, but no, definitely, I think. Listen, I mean, it's called the classical era for a reason. There's a lot of material to draw from there, and I think that. It's natural that you'd want to go back to that in terms of inspiration for things. I mean, that's where the definition of the term, of where an epic comes from. It comes from that, it comes from that time period and everything like that. And I guess it just kind of worked for Paragon because, Paolo Girardi's Italian. So
yeah. I remember Kave telling me, it's like, yeah, man, like the whole sword thing, like, come on, a bit. But he liked it, like, he still likes it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, again, it's like just about that movement of, in essence, it's the story on Paragon is like a very successful general who has conquered everything and who has seen the untold riches of the world, just getting disillusioned with it all. And he takes this quest to go this. So I'm basically lifting the Constantius Chlorus, but I'm adding my own thing to it. And he's just disillusioned with the material. So the real battle, he's seen the physical battle, but those swords that I do mention are being turned inward. And I'm trying to do that passage of outer battle to inner battle, still look back and I don't feel like I'm as successful in conveying that. And sometimes I feel I get too esoteric with certain things, but it's that passage from outer war to inner war for that album.
It's very similar to what Atlantean Codex were doing on the White Goddess in many ways.
Yeah, the Golden Bough was, we made reference to that in Beyond the Golden Throne.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you kind of borrowed that.
Have you guys ever heard of Elric of Melniboné?
Yes, from what I understand, like The Witcher ripped him off big time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, exactly. I mean, the Witcher, I think, because I knew you guys weren't inspired by The Witcher because The Witcher I think it only got translated into English in like 2012 or 2013, and like, but yeah, you know, I felt a lot of connection between you and you know, the Weird of the White Wolf, which is the first Elric of Melniboné book. You know, it's a man who gets a sword that's possessed by an evil demon, and that like finds these ridiculous ways to force him to kill all the people he loves.
Oh yeah, wow. Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
I didn't learn about Elric until like maybe a couple of years ago. And,
yeah, same for me. You know, like I don't think it was ever a big influence, but you know, it's a really cool comparison.
Yeah, I find that idea very intriguing as well.
Yeah.
I can see the similarities. Oh, by the way, that ripoff comment, I was just jesting for all the Witcher fans out there.
Well, you know, as a proud Ukrainian, I refuse to read such a Polish work.
No, honestly, I like The Witcher, but you know, I played the video game because, you know, my woman forced me to play it. I was like, yeah, damn, this is a good video game. So, you know, video games are cool, but they're always limited in terms of story. You know, I don't care what these geeks say. You know, it's not an endless depth. You know, it's there for a reason. You know, and so I went to the books, and the books are really well written, and they're very good for what they are in that style.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah. So I mean, listen, they're great stories, really, at the end of the day. And yeah, I haven't gone through all of them, but one of my friends is really into them, and he just goes on and on and on about it. Actually, I may or may not have a Dungeon Synth project occurring with said friend, so stay tuned.
Nice. I mean, you've mentioned Dungeon Synth a few times. Are you guys particularly into that style of music?
Well, I think that's an interesting question because, like, it didn't used to have that name. I mean, you know, people just used to call that, you know, neoclassical, ambient, you know, maybe they even refer to as electronic, darkwave, whatever. You know, it's kind of a name that's come up post hoc, basically. Yeah. It's after the fact. So, like,
good marketing.
No, it's great marketing. It's great marketing. As soon as you say Dungeon Synth, I mean, everybody's like, ooh, you know. We may have already hit peak Dungeon Synth at this point. I think maybe it's on its way out or something. I don't know. But I will say this much. Listen, we all loved Dead Can Dance. You know, the stuff that went into influencing Burzum. I mean, you know, like, listen, you talk about Dungeon Synth, like, you know, basically you're just being summoning without guitars. And like,
yeah, I was just gonna say summoning could like fit that. Like, yeah, I like Thief. Like, I've been getting into a lot of Thief lately. But yeah, it was like you said, it was called different things back in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
And like we got a taste, for me, of like medieval stuff, like with Obsequiate. Big fans of Obsequiate. Like, love their music.
Yeah, that was one of the better things I've heard come out recently. Well, recently.
Yeah, well, you know, where I grew up, we called Dungeon Synth Burzum prison albums. Like prison
so true. Just like, so prison synth. Okay, cool.
Yeah, pretty much.
Jail synth.
Exactly. One thing that's really funny is that, you know, you guys are all millennials, right? And this is a trend I've seen a lot in metal. You know, it's become very standardized in the last couple of years. You know, everyone knows what Black and Doom, sludge core, whatever is. And people have this insane habit, considering how cheap all this kind of mid-range to high-range recording equipment is, to have like a million bands, a lot of studio projects, you know, like huge Metal Archives pages that are like 10 times bigger than all the classic bands put together.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you guys, you've known each other since, well, you told me from the age of 15 to 16, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like maybe even 14, really. I mean, like it's been a long time, basically since early high school.
Yeah.
There's never been, and none of you, like some of you have a few projects, but it's never been like huge Metal Archives pages. It's always been you guys, no past members, and Into Oblivion. Everyone who was there from day one is still there.
Yeah. So actually,
Kave came in 2010.
Yeah, actually, and I really want to.
We just added people.
Yeah, exactly.
Over time,
and I actually want to point something out here. I want to make mention. It's like only me and Viriato could be here for the interview, but the other guys, they're all very important in the band. We've been friends forever, and Kave in particular. I originally, the band originally only had one guitarist. And, I wrote things in a more chordal or monophonic sense back then. But, Kave, I remember Kave had still does, and everybody should check it out. Speaking of quote dungeon synth, quote neoclassical, whatever, is his project Sure. Is so good. Excellent stuff. They were on the split with us for under the banner of the Serpent Sun, which is probably the most incestuous split that ever existed. It's like
you can say that again.
Yeah, all the band's share members. So anyways, it's excellent work that he did. But regardless, we met him through discussions in the metal scene, just music, philosophy, that kind of thing. And he was saying something to the effect of, at the time, that I want to do like a piece that's a variation of Creation of Monolith, because we just started playing that song at that time. We hadn't recorded it yet. Just started playing it. It didn't have harmonies or chords or anything because we didn't have a second guitarist. And so basically, I kind of told Kave that he was joining the band when we played a show. On stage, I announced, hey, we're going to have a second guitarist. I don't think I'd even mentioned it to him. Yeah. But I was just kind of like, it's like, he's got ideas, like, I want him in, And so the thing to me always about projects and things like that, because I never wanted to be limited by genre, I always decided that if I really wanted to do something, I would always make it work within my band. And the only time that I do different projects is if I'm collaborating with somebody else that has, who obviously by nature of being a different person writes differently. I firmly resolved that I didn't want to do superfluous side projects. So there's your answer.
Yeah, and just another comment on not having a big Metal Archives page. It's since we've been friends for so long, and we've all plus 10 years now, have made once a week our gold standard, and just the chemistry is what people call it. At the end of the day, we call it just friendship. We've all gone to each other's birthdays, weddings, baptisms, whatever. Just a sense of community in a band setting, and like knowing what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, and kind of just being open to. It's a lot easier to be open to criticism from people you've known for coming on 15 years, 16 years now.
Yeah, exactly.
And how important that is to a band, I feel. And you know what? The other methods work too. Like look at King Crimson, right? Like that guy couldn't work with he would work with somebody and then it would be someone different like every time. Right? Like that works too. But for us, it's like being friends and liking each other, liking each other's company has been one of the pillars of our success, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, it would be impossible for me in any project I'm in to think of continuing that project without the people that are involved in it. That's and it also comes down to the fact that at the end of the day, I know what I expect of myself, but it's also good to have brothers who expect the same of you, who expect the same of you that you expect of yourself in terms of songwriting, in terms of like the creation of art at the end of the day. And that's why that's so important.
And to use this term loosely, there is I've mentioned before, like almost there's an order, a hierarchy, if you will. Again, very loose terminology, that we kind of all know what we're good at, like our place, so to speak, air quotes, and we add our we add our advice, we add our suggestions when they're appropriate. If it falls flat, doesn't work, there's no ego there. It's just like, okay, I got to come up with something later. It's not going to work here, right? So we have, like, I don't even recall ever having a band fight.
Yeah, we've never really had honestly, it's weird to say, we've never really had an argument about it. And I think part of it is like, listen, we live in the modern era and everything like that, and like this is like the closest, like going on stage and performing and writing music like this, especially very intense music like metal. It feels like it feels like going to battle, going to war. And I remember that used to be something when we were a little more young and passionate, and maybe a little less self-conscious about this kind of thing. I used to tell Viriato, or I used to tell Kave, see you on the plain of Kurukshetra, see you on the field of battle, basically, before a show. So yeah, I think that's all very important.
Do you feel that it translates towards the live setting? Because that's something with a lot of classic death metal isn't very important. A lot of bands have never played live or played very little live. Dark Throne and Burzum. But it seems to me that there's quite a few live videos of you guys. How do you manage to play such long, complex songs in front of like these crowds? Do people get bored, or is there or do you manage to really show the intensity of your music?
I think like I've seen people like walk away and stuff like that.
Hey, you know what?
People thinking that, because sometimes like during even creation of a Monolith times, people would say to us after, like, "Hey man, how many songs did you play?" And it's like, that was one song, buddy.
Yeah, I used to get that.
We used to get that a lot. But the people that got it would stay for the whole time, and hair in their face, just bobbing, drinking their beer.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, listen, people got into it. There's a lot of the standard stuff you'd expect from a show. Headbanging, moshing, just getting into it, and it's like it definitely works in a live setting too. There's no question about that. It's just not everybody gets it, which I guess is kind of the story of the band. I mean, it's like it's 10 years down the line, and it's only really now that we're getting any kind of real reach after all of that. But yeah, no, I would say actually, sometimes the reaction you get from people was shock sometimes, or just amazement. It's like, not having heard anything like that before, because death metal band doing death metal songs, black metal band doing black metal songs, it's like whatever. But you start doing it 20 minutes and all this all these turns in the songwriting and everything. To be honest, I'm kind of impressed that the other guys in the band are able to remember the songs too, because I wrote them. I should know them. We don't, like, I'm a terrible sight reader. I can't read tabs or notes very well at all. But I can hear melody pretty well, and I can remember stuff. And when you write it, it's easy. It's just like riff to riff to riff to riff to riff to riff. But I think it's awesome that everybody else has picked it up too, because we never have to tab stuff out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only later on when you want things to be a little more precise later during the recording process, and you want to make sure that you got a click running. It's like, okay, well, now you got to make guitar pros, you got to reverse engineer them, and it's kind of a funny process in that respect.
Yeah, and so lyrics wise, like, I've got maybe like 4 to 5 pages of verse to memorize, and I keep a little folder of them. So I make sure, like, maybe a week, 2 weeks before I'm reading it every day, going over the songs a lot. Like, and I've had other vocalists in our scene ask me, dude, how do you memorize all of that? It's honestly, I treat it like homework for the show. Just memorize and try to put on the best show I can.
I'm thinking of the 2011 video, A Gift of the Scourge.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there is so much passion. It's absolutely insane. The playing is really tight. Viriato's going absolutely ballistic during, the parts he's not singing. And
Yeah, man.
It's funny you say that because Roman was just like, you talk about like, it's not so superfluous, but Roman's like, man, just like, get some stage presence. Look at the guy from Cataclysm.
Oh yeah, Sylvain Hood.
Sylvain Hood, right?
Yeah.
Look at him, and I would just look at live Cataclysm videos with him in it, and I'm like seeing this guy go ballistic, and for me that's the standard, and I always feel like I'm unleashing something when I'm on stage, like something more primal and animalistic, and that's what I try to go for. And outside of that, just like a well-composed, nice guy. Well, look at me, I'm like a nice guy, But it's definitely like on stage, I've just the anxiety of being up there sometimes, and it's just when you're thrashing around like that with your head, your neck's hurting, and like you're dizzy, I feel like I have to catch my balance sometimes. It's definitely like there is a power there, and I want to convey that power. I want to kind of give that power to the audience, and not so much for moshing, but here's this energy, like here's this like transcendental thing that's happening. Like, have it, please.
Yeah, and listen, it kind of comes down to the whole thing we had at the beginning of the entire idea of the total artwork. So like if it is truly total, if there's like a shelf that's happening here, that's got to be reflected on stage too. And I think that's really what it came down to, is that everything nothing can be superfluous. Everything needs to be in its place, important, and connected to everything else. And so, yeah, come on, like, listen, as funny as it is to like look at an old funeral video from like Varg being 17, and you can tell that Varg is Varg because he's like leaning up against the wall playing bass, staring down. Like as funny as like stuff like that is, or like maybe some bands actually get their presence is their emotionlessness or whatever. It's that's possible too. But just nobody came to see a bunch of guys just stand around on stage and do nothing. It kind of comes down to that.
What's surprising is that compared to a lot of lesser bands, you never had quite the same success that you guys should have deserved. Well, and in my opinion, you're on my label, so obviously I want you guys to have a lot of success. A lot of people I've spoken to, like, who are these guys? Where have they been all this time?
Viriato has had some things to say about that in the past. What did you call it? The Toronto Curse or something like that?
Oh yeah. Well, there's a Razor song called American Luck, and and it goes like American Luck not meant for Canucks or something like that. And it's true. I call it the Toronto Curse or the Canadian Curse. And there's a few bands that break the mold like Rush and Blasphemy and Conquer, but it just by like I always saw like the Toronto scene, the Canadian scene as innovators, and I think Canada has innovated a lot of stuff. Like look at Rush, for instance. Like who was doing what Rush was doing back in the day? Nobody. And they got success from it. But for genres that are not as well known, like you kind of like live and die here. And you're not you might be well known here, and then you'll have like a few fans in Finland and stuff like that. But I always kind of thought like, I'm gonna blow smoke up my own ass here, our own ass here. That it was going to be much like Celtic Frost, who were like hated in the beginning, and then later on it's just like, oh shit, like 2 Megatherium's actually really good. And man, I forgot what the first album was called.
Morbid Tales.
Yeah, Morbid Tales is like so good. Like their influence is kind of felt later on, and I kind of like resigned myself to that for Into Oblivion, and then just sending out emails, sending out demos to labels, and just getting no response or just like a straight out rejection. I'm just kind of like, what? I've resigned myself to being that band, hopefully in the future, as egotistical as that sounds.
Yeah, you know what? I think it comes down to us not being very marketable. I think at the end of the day, I didn't write this to be marketable. For me, the music was very much about certain people are going to get it, and I want those people to enjoy it. I want those people to derive, to derive power and meaning and things from it. And it was always for that. And this is never going to be, this will never be full-time work or whatever. We'll be lucky if we can pay the rent on the jam space with
with what we make from the band.
What we make, yeah, exactly. But that's not the point. And you know what? The fact that people that I respect enjoy the music, and that's the most important thing to me. And how do you market a black metal band that has 20-minute long songs and doesn't even have a good comparison for another band that it sounds like? Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. Like this is a problem people have very often. Yeah. It's like when they're trying to describe us to somebody else, it's like I don't even know what to describe you as. What the reference is.
And the Terminus guys like hit the nail on the head too. Mm-hmm. Again, like we're going to be fanning their balls a lot. Like at the end of Eagle of the Serpent Sun, where it's just like you go and hug your bros and you have that hope at the end. When I'm writing lyrics, I want people listening to IO to find that power in themselves and to succeed in whatever they do. Right. I want to give that, as positivity, if you want to use that terminology, but I want people to get power from what I write. And lyrically, I want people to get power from our riffs. I want them to take that and soar. Like that's one of my main motivations for that. It's just take this hope, find a band of brothers and go on into the sunset.
Yeah. That's find strength in the travails of the modern age.
Exactly.
How do you market a black death metal band, with 20+ minute songs? I'm going to ask you the opposite question. How did Opeth become so famous with terrible 20-minute songs?
That's true. I'm going to admit something here that I have admitted to people in the past. The first song off Orchid is actually not bad as a heavy metal influenced song. It's kind of got a King Diamond Merciful Fate thing going on for like the first couple of minutes. That one's actually okay. That's the most I'll ever say about Opeth. Good point. How the heck did they ever get popular? Who knows? I think it was the clout of I listened to a progressive death metal band that talks about serious topics, implying that they're death metal, and also just it's you throw in enough frilly stuff like, oh man, they got acoustics, they got this, they got that. See that already by that point you can kind of market that, but that just shows that popularity is not ruled by objective quality, shall we say?
Because you guys have all that stuff. You have the acoustic guitars, you have the violin, you have the cello.
Yes, but we had songwriting first, which I think makes you unmarketable.
Very true. Now, you guys have been doing this for a long time, and there's this weird curse that happens in extreme metal, the 90s stuff, where a lot of bands fall off the wagon really quickly. Some of them, end up in very bad places in life. A lot of them die. But then, I think Samoth broke the curse where, there's some bands that keep getting better as they get older. They keep everything, maybe they're less immature. Maybe they manage to use all that experience. Mm-hmm. And I believe, Into Oblivion is definitely one of those bands that just keeps getting better and more refined as time goes on. What do you attribute that to?
Oh, that's a good question.
Just mindset, I think.
Yeah.
Really a lot of just attitude. Like again, like when I just mentioned that we want to, when I write stuff, just giving that power to our listeners and beyond, and whoever they tell us, like whoever they tell about like our music, it's we expect that of ourselves too, and like we try to hold ourselves accountable to that too.
The day that I the day that we put out something that's not as good or better than the last release is the day that I call it quits. Like it has to be that way. So I won't write something. I won't put something out unless I think that it's quality. And you know what, again, you know, pure ego here, but you know, we got a pretty high standard to live up to at this point. So, you know, if it's going to take a while to write something, it's going to take a while to write something. I think that the fact of the matter is that we're willing to take time with stuff. Whereas, you know, other bands feel the necessity to maybe put out an album every year, like, you know, so sometimes even more than that, or even every 2 years. And if you don't have that pressure on you of the fact that like, oh, you always have to be, you know, you just have to be like a riff factory pumping things out. I think that helps with your longevity, you know. And I think that it is interesting because, yeah, you will notice that a lot of metal bands, as they get older, like they just lose something along the way and the music's not what it used to be. I think that was a very noble thing about Aversa Fira. That's just when they, you know, when they couldn't, they never had a bad album. They never had a bad album. You know, you could say that about, you could have said that about Burzum before the post-prison releases. You know.
Final question. What lies in the future of Into Oblivion?
Well, we're going to keep refining the process that we've had before. I think that basically the bar is very high. The things we're reaching for are so high up that I think we'll never get there, which means that there's always going to be room for us to improve. You know, until people are speaking about us in the same breath as the 19th century romantic composers, which isn't going to happen, you know, until that happens, I'm going to keep striving for that. And so that's the future. The more I can draw out, I don't even want to say elevate, because this essence has always been in metal, but the more that I can draw it out and make it more clear and more obvious and make it, you know, the more I can, I guess, just go back to the original word, the more I can elevate it. That is what I will do with Into Oblivion. That's what I'll do with any musical project I'm involved in. And that is what the future holds for us. You know, we're already writing new material.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep writing. And you know what? Maybe it's going to be 10 years before another album. Who knows what will happen in 10 years. But we're going to keep doing it. And that's basically the future. And, you know, hopefully once everything calms down, we're going to do a show again. That's going to be good, you know.
Yeah.
But who knows when that'll be, you know. So honestly, it's almost a very workmanlike attitude towards this, though the goals are somewhat lofty. It's just, you know, we're going to practice, we're going to add some more riffs, we're going to shape songs, and we're going to keep going on the trajectory that we've been on.
And for the future, I just from my perspective and from your lyric, I hope I can keep writing something that that inspires whoever listens to seize the day, to be the best they can be. I'm going to sound like a motivational speaker right now. You know? I'm not trying to sell you any snake oil, guys. Just to be the best you guys can be and conquer whatever lies in front of you. And I'm hoping that I can continue doing that for our fans, to people who have just casually listened to our music. I expect that of myself, and yes, I expect that of you too.
Into Oblivion, you know, How to Change Your Life book coming soon. All right, so thank you very much, guys, for being on. For everyone listening, you can order Winds of Serpentine Ascension and Paragon from our big cartel. You can also get it from the band's Bandcamp. Hope to hear more music from you in the not so distant future.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.
Hails.
Hails.
Cheers.
Cheers.